So here we are. Yeah, good evening. Welcome to our virtual trend tour by CIRCULAZE. This is session number 3 after covering already the topics fashion and textile and packaging within session 1 and 2. My name is Natascha Zeljko and I'm the co-founder and executive partner of CURAZE, and I have the pleasure to guide you through the evening tonight through the trend tour. Perhaps a short explanation on CIRCULAZE. What is the goal actually? So we launched the initiative in early summer in order to educate, to raise awareness, and to connect corporates and startups in the field of circular economy. The aim is to push forward circular projects and to enhance collaboration. And today we will talk about circular solutions for waste. Perhaps a personal anecdote. When I was a kid, a small kid, I used to visit my grandma who has a small farm in that time Yugoslavia, today Slovenia. And I was raised in a more urban environment. And I was really astonished because my grandma, she didn't have a trash can at all. So that's why the reason was she produced all she needed, all her food, her fruits, vegetables, meat, everything she needed, she produced herself. So she didn't need a trash can. And I was really astonished. And that was perhaps the first time in my life I came across the principle of circular economy, of course, without knowing that this is circular economy, without having this fancy term for this principle. Yeah, so it's not new. Today evening, we will present you 3 startups from the field of circular economy. You will get to know them later on. All of them are from our top 20 list we created this summer within our initiative, which was carefully selected by our wonderful jury. And speaking of the jury, I just found something really nice. Part of the jury was Professor Michael Braungart. He is the inventor of Cradle to Cradle, and he just got a very, very fancy award. It was the German Sustainability Award, the Honor Award. And I found here something in a magazine called Nomad, and he says, if you create waste, you're just stupid. Yeah, so this is perhaps the motto of this evening. And our startups here, by the way, are joining us from, it's a very international selection. They will join us from Berlin, they will join us from Bristol, UK, and also from Nairobi, Kenya. And I also have to mention, without our wonderful partners, we couldn't have done it, this initiative, we couldn't have started it. And I would like also to thank you to our partners who joined us from the early beginning for this initiative. This is DB Cargo, it's DATEV, 4P Capital, Hammersbach, VP Group, Oddo, BHF, De facto, Rödel und Partner, Jack Wolfskin, Bayersdorf, Messe München, and Food Affairs. And speaking of 4P Capital, we have also a wonderful keynote speaker from 4P Capital invited this evening, who will do a short introduction and keynote. It's Xavier Sarras. Xavier is one of our partners and jury members, and he's also the founding partner of 4P Capital. He's an impact investor with a deep knowledge in the field of sustainability. Welcome, Xavier.
Hey, Natascha. Hello, everyone. Thank you again for having me for this 3rd session. It's a pleasure to be part of this. As Natascha mentioned, I'm an impact investor and the founding partner of 4P Capital. We're an early stage venture capital firm that invests into the carbon reduction fields, into circular economy, into sustainability education, and into well-being. We call all of this resilience, which is why you can see this investing in resilience at the top of my head. We really want to make the world more resilient. That's about making nature more resilient and humans more resilient to actually get to these solutions. Today, we're going to speak about waste. I will speak about waste for a few minutes to you just to kind of do the warming up for the actual stars, who are the startups that we'll be looking at later on. Let me just quickly share the presentation. This should now be working for you guys. So let me cover waste for you. Maybe the first thing that we really would want to clarify is, what is waste? And how do we get to zero waste? Because that's the actual trajectory that we're taking. Waste is defined as unwanted and unusable material that is of no use. It is absolutely useless. That is waste. And we're producing way too much of it. There is just so much waste that we need to take care of. The global waste management market is $1,612 billion in 2020 US dollars. Again, $1,612 billion US dollars is the global waste management market in 2020. It's projected to be 2,500 billion US dollars by just 2030. This is a humongous market. And the market is so huge because of the waste that we're producing, which is much more scary than that. The average European is thought to generate about 180 kilos of packaging waste every year. And this could potentially rise to 19% by 2030 if we don't take action. The US is the biggest producer of per capita waste with 800 kilos per year. Such a large country with so much waste per person is creating a huge problem. And the global waste production is actually predicted to rise by 70% by 2050. We need to start managing trash, and seriously managing trash. What's the best way? Recycling. Recycling is the process of converting used rubbish into new materials, as we probably all know by now. And 100% of reuse, reuse, and recycling would lead to 0 kilos of waste yearly. If you look at the image, you probably did find a mistake, didn't you? Yes, we built in a waste that is maybe not a waste. It's the third picture. It's a different kind of waste. It's not quite the waste we mean, but consuming less is one of the solutions to reducing waste and potentially looking better. Let's look at the 4 big types of waste that we have on a big scale. We have the industrial waste, and these are the wastes created in factories and industries. Most industries dump their waste into rivers, in seas, and that causes a lot of pollution. Forests produce waste because there are byproducts from forest clearing, and that's a huge portion of actual global waste. And there is municipal waste, which is produced within a city district, and that's the type of waste that we just heard about when we listened to European and US figures. And the last and 4th large pillar of waste globally is agricultural waste, which is produced in running agriculture. So cattle waste, weed, husk, and other things like that. When we look at the total municipal waste and focus on this for a moment, it's municipal solid waste. It's the waste that city districts have to dispose from after human consumption and use. It's produced by us. It's produced by households when we consume. It's basically what we call trash or garbage. It consists of all the everyday items that we use and then throw away. Product packaging, which is one of the big ones, grass clippings, furniture, clothing, bottles, food scraps, newspapers, appliances, paint, and batteries. And just reflect on your week, how much you're throwing away. We're a 4-person household here with 2 little kids. I'm amazed and shocked as to how much waste we're actually producing every week. You can see on the graph that the biggest source of waste is actually paper, followed by food and plastic. But then if we add the recycling layer on top of it, it changes a little bit as to who the actual leaders in producing waste are. 70% of cardboard and paper gets recycled, whereas only 9% of plastics ever get recycled. And now you see the real troublemakers in waste. They're food and plastic, and only 1/3 paper. But paper degrades after about 6 weeks. That's still not great, but it's better than plastics that basically never degrade because it takes hundreds and hundreds of years and they just end up as microplastics in our organisms. You actually consist of 1% plastic waste in your organism already. And you'll be listening to one of the startups later that's dealing with that problem. So this graphic is really more telling because it shows the net waste that was not recycled but ended up in the landfill. And municipal solid waste landfills are the third largest source of human-related methane emissions in the US, for example. And there are also that type of problems at scale globally. The key problems that we have to face are growing landfills, illegal dumping, incineration, which again is causing gases, and unaccounted, untraceable waste that we just never find, but just lies around somewhere. So overall, issues that really are worth tackling. Let's look at these three main perpetrators that we need to focus on. Food waste has 1.3 billion tons of edible food wasted. This could feed 3 billion people. So basically the global south. It never leaves the farm, it gets lost, it gets spoiled during distribution, or just thrown away at home, in hotels, in schools, in grocery stores, and restaurants. Food in landfill emits methane and is one of the big contributors to the methane emissions in landfills, and therefore to our global greenhouse gas levels. Fashion waste. The way that we consume fashion and the quick fashion, the fast fashion mechanisms have led to us increasing the consumption of clothes dramatically. The fast fashion companies launch up to 54 collections per annum, and there are about 55 pieces of clothing in your closet on average that you never use, or that end up in waste landfills. Plastic packaging, when you look at that, you see that plastic is a necessity, but most plastics really land in landfills and do not degrade for hundreds of years there. So the big proportion of the environmental effect comes down to consumer choices and how we go about consuming our products, but of course also about how we manage waste in total when we cannot change our consumption patterns. To get to zero waste, we need to create a fully circular economy. And that means we need to come up with new product designs that are disposable, reusable, that can be reduced, that can be preventing waste. We need to drive consumption down in massive ways, and we really need to start recycling. And for all the other pieces, we need to gear up the waste management. The EU has passed a law in 2019 to ban most of the common single-use plastic items, such as plastic cutlery, stirrers, straws, etc. But officials hopefully or gladly want to go further now to really tackle the soaring amounts of packaging rubbish. The EU member states would have to reduce packaging waste per capita by 50% by 2040, compared with 2018 figures. And officials really think this could be achieved by more reuse and refilling, as well as tighter controls on packaging. For example, e-commerce retailers would have to ensure that empty space in the box is a maximum 40% in relation to the product, which again causes more density of packaging and therefore less surplus packaging. Some avoidable packaging would face an outright ban, such as mini shampoo bottles in hotels and single-use packaging for small quantities of fruit and vegetables. And hotels, cafes, and restaurants would no longer be able to use throwaway cups and plates for consumers dining in. Recycling can also include a waste-to-energy market, for example, which is a very growing domain. It already is a $44 billion global market. There are solutions out there, and we just need to adopt them and develop them very quickly. Some of these solutions that already are in the market and that we call impact heroes in the field are, for example, Rubicon, which is a developer of a software that connects waste generators and waste removal firms. Rubicon has already raised a total of $380 million over 9 rounds. We also can see Clean Robotics, which is a manufacturer of a smart trash bin robot for sorting recyclables from landfill waste. Great technology, very early, but they've already raised 10 million in a very, very short amount of time. Or Roadrunner Recycling, which is a provider of data-driven waste management platforms for commercial waste recycling. And that makes waste and recycling significantly more efficient. It's really producing advanced logistics by extracting the maximum value from a material that gets recycled. That company has raised 180 million over the last few years. And then there's also Inevo, which has a sensor and analytics software where you only pay for the pickups you need and that reduces your costs significantly. So they also look at the financial aspects of waste management. They provide a full management of waste recycling services for restaurants, retail, and commercial property customers throughout all of North America by providing a predictive end-to-end solution that automates the whole planning and operation of waste and recycling. This company has been funded with 55 million, also over the course of the last few years. So you're seeing there is already technology really in the field coming up with great innovation. I could probably talk forever about waste and the manifold solutions that are needed, but I'm more than happy to now leave the stage to the impact heroes that we have with us today that will talk about their solutions and show you great innovation there already. If you really have more questions around how to invest into impact, what waste is all about, how a circular economy can help, feel free to reach out either via email or to me on LinkedIn, which is just Xavier Sarras on LinkedIn profile. Again, thank you for having me, Natascha, and now enjoy the rest of the pitches, please.
Thank you so much, Xavier. That was really impressive. And I have to say also shocking numbers, but at the same time, a wake-up call for all of us. So still a way to go. And yeah, happy to hear more from the smart solutions. You also mentioned some of the leading startups. Yeah, so thanks a lot, Xavier. See you next week. What will be our last session for this year? Thanks. And yeah, we will move on now to our presentations. And before we do so, I would like to motivate you, dear audience, to ask questions, because this is also for exchange. You will have really opportunity to ask our founders direct questions, and you can do that with the F&A button at the bottom of the program here. Just type in your questions and we will follow up on this. So first startup we will present you this evening is mujō, who is joining us from Berlin. We have here Uni Sun Nien House. I hope my pronunciation it's awful, but sorry. So Uni. Yeah, and mujō, very interesting. mujō has found a solution with their biodegradable packaging materials made of kelp, which is a fast-growing algae, I learned, that doesn't need additional water or agricultural land to grow. How smart is this? And I'm excited to learn more. Uni, the stage is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the invitation, and good evening, everyone. Yeah, I mean, you already mentioned a lot of numbers, but I will present a couple of numbers as well to you. So I hope you can see my screen. Can you see the full screen?
Yes, all good.
And does it change?
No.
No, okay. Because I often have this problem. Sorry. Second.
No worries. We know this now for 3 years, the Zoom sessions. Let's see. Looks
now
good.
it should work. Perfect.
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, we are mujō, a Berlin-based startup. We found ourselves in last year, and mujō basically is a Japanese word, and the origin is in Buddhism, and it refers to the impermanence of all beings, so that nothing stays forever. And yeah, so let's start. Why we're doing this? Every one of us eats about 5 grams of plastic per week, and this is as much as a credit card. And one of the biggest drivers behind that is the plastic packaging industry, producing 133 million tons of new plastic packaging every year. And every single piece of plastic that made it into the ocean in the past 50 years is still out there somewhere. And this needs a radical change, because if we continue like this, there will be more plastic than fish in the ocean by 2050. And the perfect time for change is now due to the political frameworks, as we already heard. The European Green Deal states that all packaging must be circular by 2030, and the Single-Use Plastic Directive bans single-use fossil-based products. So across Europe, we are talking about 23 million tons of plastic packaging per year, reaching 41 million tons in 2030. Less than 15% gets recycled, and less than 1% is bio-based and biodegradable. So the whole European industry basically is looking for truly circular and bio-based packaging solutions for the remaining 84% in the next 8 years. I'm Juni, I'm the co-founder of mujō, and my passion is product and material design. And together with Anne-Kathrin's background in process and chemical engineering and Kilian's business development and finance experience, we form an interdisciplinary team. And we envision a future in which materials of today support the life of tomorrow. And that's why we design solely with the basic building blocks provided by nature. Natural packages that protect, for example, nuts, fruits, crabs, or shells are designed in a very smart way. They all consist of the same universal building blocks, such as fats, proteins, polysaccharides, and minerals. And for these components, they are everywhere on the planet. We have degradation mechanisms such as fungi or bacteria, and they can break down these packagings into the basic building blocks again and again, which then again form the basis for a new life. And we believe that all packaging must be designed in a way that it is based on these universal building blocks and which can circulate in these biological cycles. So they can, decompose everywhere in nature. And we found our building block in a seaweed called kelp. Because kelp doesn't need any agricultural land or additional water. It grows in the ocean and it grows really quickly. It can grow up to 60 centimeters per day. And because it grows so rapidly, it binds CO2 20 times faster than trees, for example. And it also binds nutrients and cleans the ocean water. And we transformed the seaweed into our first packaging material. This is a 100% bio-based foil that protects the product along its shelf life and biodegrades completely after use on land, in the compost, and most importantly, in the ocean. In order to illustrate the potential of the seaweed, let's have a closer look. So on an offshore cultivation area that has the size of Croatia, which is 60,000 square kilometers, we could harvest 5.46 billion tons of seaweed per year. And with this amount of seaweed, we can bind 1 billion tons of CO2, which is 3% of the global annual greenhouse gas emissions. And with this amount of seaweed, we could produce 327 million tons of foil, which could cover the current European plastic packaging consumption for 14 years. Unlike other bioplastics, our material is not 90 or 95%, but 100% bio-based and biodegradable. Plus, we don't need any farmland and additional water. However, we not only design a completely new material, our aim is to redesign the whole packaging experience in order to make packaging fun again. And to demonstrate this, Einhorn was the perfect first partner for us to create first design prototypes with our material, which you can see on the left picture. We see ourselves as developers, producers, and sellers of the material so that converters and brands can produce their individual packaging out of it. And the seaweed we use is harvested in Europe, and we buy the extracted polymers directly from the biorefineries located in Brittany, so in France. For the production, On industrial scale, we want to collaborate with a production partner, and for R&D purposes and smaller testing series, we are currently building our own small pilot plant. But however, to bring a truly circular packaging material to the market in long-term, win-win relationships with all stakeholders involved are very important to us. So win-win relationship with the kelp, with the decomposers, with the biosphere, and we want to establish a circular economy with all the stakeholders in a circular ecosystem. Let's have a short look at the market. So the market is huge, but the presence of sustainable alternatives is very small. The revenue for flexible packaging foils accounts 42.6 billion euros worldwide, and less than 1% of that is bio-based and biodegradable. So the polymer alginate has several strengths which can be used in different use cases. So due to the excellent fat barrier and a good oxygen barrier, solid cosmetic products containing oil, for example, soap or bath additives, are very good use cases. Or in the food sector, cheese is very good, as well as baked goods. And as you can see here, we can also make paper coatings, which are oil repellent, and chocolate is also a very good field of application for the material. And we can produce, the film is basically, it's transparent, and we can produce it water soluble and water insoluble. So far, we have been financed by a prize money, which has enabled us to produce film continuously on a pilot scale. We also did the pilot cooperation with the company Einhorn, and we could establish an exclusive cooperation for product development with the Research Institute, PTS, in Dresden. We just filed a first patent, and now we have, we are in the last step of application for a development grant for the from BMBF. So what are our next steps until the market launch in 2024? We want to further develop the material properties, especially the heat solubility and the water vapor barrier. We want to build our first small pilot plant on which we can produce then small series, and we want to ensure the industrial production. We want to set up an industrial production line, and want to enter the market in 2024. But the foils are just the beginning, because we can also produce nets, paper coatings, and also yarns. So you can choose a future in which you don't eat credit cards. Thank you very much. And if I'm happy if anyone wants to get in contact with me, this is my email address. Don't hesitate to write me, and ask me any questions you have.
Okay. Thank you so much, Unit. This is really thrilling and also so interesting to see all the applications you have for these different fields, and big plans ahead for 2024. Would be cool to see more of this really in our everyday life. Perhaps if nobody else has a question, I can start perhaps. First of all, how did you come across this idea to use Cal to produce this material? How did it start?
So it started in a project during uni, and we started first with a yarn, and we wanted to produce a yarn which can be used in the fashion industry for fast fashion. Mm-hmm. But during our research, we found out that actually the strength of the material is that it biodegrades very quickly, and that it can also be water soluble, and we didn't want to modify it chemically. Mm-hmm. And this is why we said, well, where can we have the most impact? And we saw the packaging industry, plastic packaging industry, and this is how we came up with the idea to produce foils and plastic packaging from kelp. But it started with a resource because we were really interested in the resource and its the high potential of it.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, and when we saw it in our everyday life, we have so many foils everywhere. At least if we don't take care when we do our shopping, right? If we are not aware, then you can have this tons of them at the end of the month. Yeah, and why did you choose this biological approach? Because you could also do a technical or technological approach. Why is this?
Yeah, several reasons, as I already mentioned in the presentation, but there's a really good paper I can really recommend from the Biomimicry Institute, which is called The Nature of Fashion, and I think they explain it really good, that the man-made material cycles we build, they are in the biosphere, and our technical loops, they always leak, like, because nature disperses. So there will always be leakage, and the plastic will end up somewhere in nature, and then it needs to be biodegradable. This is our, like, this is why we do this, and why we think this is the only correct way to do it as well, that recycling is more a downcycling, and you always need virgin material, and you cannot use recycled plastics for food and cosmetic packaging. These are the main reasons.
Okay, not yet. Okay. And perhaps last question, we saw your milestones and we saw your plans for the next years. You already work together with Einhorn, but could you think of other companies or fields, industries who could profit from your research on your first products now?
Of course, there are a lot of different fields of application, and we talk a lot with different potential pilot customers, and we do different testings with their products, and so does it answer your question?
Yeah, which fields could that be? Because we are here to help, right? Because I mentioned it also in the intro. What we want to do is enhance collaboration. And if you could think of an ideal partner in the industry, who could that be? So you started with Einhorn, but perhaps there are others who might be interesting.
I'm thinking about the perfect partner. Maybe someone who uses foils which often end in nature, like snack bars, for example. You know, if you take them to the beach and then you snack, and then they probably land more often in the ocean than packaging for salads, for example.
Okay.
But I don't have one use case in my mind.
Okay.
They're different. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, it's a big field. But we have also a question now coming in from the audience. Doris Wagner is asking, is the foil PAL resistant? I have to have my glasses. To wrap around goods, like around suitcases at airports, for example. This doable with foil.
Okay. Yes, we could do that, of course. We also thought about stretch foils and this application. The only problem is that in the first years, our material is definitely more expensive, and these foils are really cheap, really cheap. So I hope we will get there in the future, but I think not at in the first 3 or 5 years. Yeah.
Okay, so still a little bit a way to go, but basically it's doable. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, sure. Very good. Okay, I would say that's it. Thanks a lot, Juni, for your presentation. It was really thrilling to hear and see your smart solutions. And yeah, we will now hand over to our next startup, which is the next in line is Matter. Here, Rob Hemsley. Hi, welcome.
Good evening.
Good evening. Joining us from Bristol. And just to give you a short idea what Matter is doing, it's really, really thrilling. So scientists estimate that microplastics pollutants washed off synthetic cloths during laundry contribute up to 35% of the plastic polluting our oceans. Matter is on that mission to reduce that figure, addressing the source of the issue, your laundry. So, and you are doing that with Gulp. It's a special filter you invented, and yeah, very thrilled to hear and learn more about Matter and Gulp.
Great, thank you. Fantastic, thank you, and thank you for being here, and thank you to Uni as well. We're also strong believers that seaweed will save the world. So congratulations on your work there as well. Let me just bring up my screen and we'll get into this. So hopefully you can see, bear with me one moment. So you're seeing probably the wrong screen, aren't you? So let me swap that around. Now, are you seeing a screen with a Matter on it?
Yeah, the first slide looked okay, to be honest. That was the starting slide with Matter.
So are you seeing the starting slide now or the display settings slide?
I see both. I see the first and the second, I guess. Or
okay, perfect. How about that one?
That's good.
Perfect, excellent, thank you. So, well, thank you for all being here. I suppose to start, there are around 50 trillion particles of microplastic in our oceans right now. So to put that into context, that's about 100 times as many pieces of plastic as there are stars in our galaxy. And what we find is this plastic is now in our food, and it's in our water, and it's in our air. And thank you, Uni. I mean, we're eating it 5 grams every week, which is horrendous. And just recently found microplastics in rainfall in every continent around the world. What we know as well is that this microplastics do damage to human health and also to ecosystems that fundamentally support life on Earth. So hi, welcome. My name is Rob Hemsley. As mentioned, I'm the CFO for Matter, and I also look after our sustainability and policy programs as we go through. Matter's a microplastic technology company. And what we mean by that is we're focused on capturing, harvesting, and then recycling microplastic back into the circular economy. I suppose to lead into that, where we look at the problem for microplastics in general, as part of the wider plastic pollution problem that Xavier mentioned right at the very beginning, plastic pollution is going to cost society $7.1 trillion per year by 2040. That's the volume of problem we're producing, and it's an increasing problem without producing solutions such as circularity and pollution prevention. What we're trying to do is to build a technology platform that can solve microplastic pollution at global scale. And we look at the current market conditions to do this. It's absolutely perfect. We are seeing unprecedented change in this space and huge amounts of uptake. We've got legislative action across the board on microplastic emissions. You talked about microplastic and other plastic legislation happening across Europe. We're seeing the same in the US. We're seeing more happening in Asia. And that's really absolutely providing the right conditions for this, this revolution to take place. We're seeing amazing consumer awareness. Microplastics now are the topic of common media consumption. So it's on the TV news, on the newspapers. Most people these days are now aware that microplastics are a problem. And that's a huge change from where we were 3 or 5 years ago. We're seeing rising resource scarcity. So the demand for recycled and second life products is increasing. We've finally now seen recycled PET is actually worth more per ton than virgin PET. So we're seeing that demand growing, particularly across Europe. And what we also see from our perspective is unprecedented demand on outdated infrastructure. This is systems that were built 50 to 100 years ago that simply don't have the capability to prevent this pollution because of the size. So for us at Matter, our job really, the way we see it, what we own really is providing a solution to stop further microplastic emissions into the environment. We look at this uniquely as a truly global challenge. So we're not looking at sort of one or two applications. What we're trying to do is solve microplastics as a problem. So how do we do that? That's a really important question. How do you build an industry around the microplastic emissions? So we really look at three pillars. It's innovation, it's education, and it's legislation. The innovation piece is our R&D program. We're developing solutions to microplastic and other micropollutant emissions. Education's key. We need to basically explain and educate individuals, corporations, and governments about the challenge, about how the challenge not only can cause damage and ecological impact over time, but also the solution that is readily available and about to be commercialized. And then legislation is the point that takes us from, small scale or relatively low scale consumer uptake all the way through to mandated uptake through large corporations, governments. And we're already seeing that. We've seen legislation in multiple countries around the world in this space. What's really important as we go through this process is you have to focus the effort on where you have the maximum impact and results. So we started out mapping where microplastics come from. And thank you again, Natascha, for mentioning 35% of primary microplastics entering our oceans every year come from textiles. You probably, if you aren't aware of the microplastic problem, surprised that actually one of the largest sources of textile microplastic pollution comes from our clothes. When we wash our clothes at home, we release up to 700,000 particles of plastic that you never see. It flows out with the wastewater straight through into the natural environment and ultimately into the oceans. Just an example, I'm going to show you this. This is a representation of the amount of plastic that leaves your washing machine every single year. So when you're washing your clothes at home, this is the volume of material we see coming out of that machine every year. What you can see is it's soluble. What that means is it gets captured into the water and it floats. It's very difficult to separate through conventional filtration processes because it looks and is a similar density to water. It's very difficult to capture that material. We've colored it green just to make it a bit more obvious. Not all your clothes will come out green, but just to sort of show what it looks like. So we look at then how we sort of roll this technology solution out across the major source of microplastics. So we see textiles as the largest source, 35%, and around maybe a third to a half of that will come from domestic washing. The other half comes from textile production, typically. We see 28% of microplastic emissions coming from car tires, and particularly the runoff from roads of using passenger and heavy goods vehicles. And we also see wastewater treatment, which is ultimately the last point of capture for what we call city dust. And that's all the other pieces of plastic and microplastic emissions we produce through our general urban life that fundamentally wash through our wastewater systems. And then the last point of access then is in our wastewater treatment plants. So we look then to develop some technology that doesn't just work in one of these applications. Fundamentally, we've looked to develop a technology that's scalable across all these pollution points so that we can then implement a similar and scalable piece of technology to address the microplastic emissions. This is fundamentally what our business is about. It's about capturing microplastics in a way that enables us to then recover them and recycle them. So we've developed a core technology. It's a microfilter. It's both sustainable, which means it's self-cleaning. It doesn't consume filter components. The art is to produce microplastic filters that fill up very quickly and then you throw them away. And typically, you can consume 10 to 100 times more plastic than you actually save. We don't have disposable components. That's critical to us. What we're trying to do is not produce a problem or eliminate a problem by producing an even bigger problem. We consume an incredibly low amount of energy. So typically with membrane filtration, where you're capturing very small particles, the more you have your filter blocking up, the harder you have to push the fluid through it. For us, we don't have that problem. We have a self-cleaning filter, which means we don't have that pressure consumption, which becomes really important for large-scale applications. We can then capture the material. So you can probably see in this space here, there's this strange ring sort of arrangement. That ring fundamentally captures the material, and we're able to remove the material without damaging the filter. That means we can harvest the material to recycle it. And then the whole process is fully recyclable. Nothing in our filter is consumable. At the end of its life, we can simply recycle it and produce a new filter from the same materials. That's one half of the technology. The other half is scalability. That's really important to us too. So it's not any good really just capturing a small amount of microplastics from one of those sources. We want to capture microplastics from all those sources, which means our technology needs to scale from around 10 litres of water per hour. That's about 100 litres of water per day, all the way up to 1 million plus litres of water per day at a medium-sized wastewater treatment plant or a textile production factory. We're also able to filter in both water and air. We have minimal maintenance because we're not replacing filter cartridges. So the filter just keeps running, it cleans itself and will run and run. The footprint's really small, and I'll show you an example of our really interesting industrial scale application shortly, which will show that. And it's also relatively low cost. I mean, we have a product here that will work in domestic applications. It needs to be affordable to consumers. To scale a bigger application, that does not cost a significant amount more. So what we're trying to do here is to solve all the problems of microfiltration that exist today. And just an example, here's an example of a filter working at the moment. What happens is this blue material is simulated microplastics. The filter blocks up. As soon as it feels like it's blocked, it cleans itself and it runs again. And that captured material moves over to the right and is ready for harvesting out in the next cycle. So this is our filter. It's running. We have it running in multiple applications. And that's really important to us because what we're trying to do is capture all of those emission sources. Our first product to market is a product called Gulp, which was mentioned right at the very beginning. Gulp is a microplastic filter that's retrofittable to most washing machines in the EU and across Europe and India and Australia and New Zealand. We're working towards the US version, which has the machines over there are slightly different for us. But what it crucially does for us is it creates a consumer product that we can take to market and start this microplastic filtration revolution and bring the consumers along the way. What we're trying to do is to make microplastic filtration available to everyone. So how do we scale that? It's really important for us. We're starting at home, so we're launching in the UK, as you would imagine. Just to give you some scale for this, there's 28 million households in the UK. We just ran a market study literally in the last couple of months, so we know it's recent, and particularly given the economic challenges of the world today, we're really excited to find that 9% of the market would take the product as it is right now. That's about £120 million of revenue for the next 3 to 5 years, just to service that market in the UK. It's really exciting for us. That's just a proportion of our market. We tested that. We ran a Kickstarter last month. So those of you who saw us at the event back at the end of October, I think it was, we were midway through our campaign at that point. So we successfully closed that. It was one of the top Kickstarters of all time. We're thrilled with the results. But that's really exciting because that's also bringing on distributors. So we now have 3 distributors to take this out across the UK next year. What we're working on at the moment, as I talked about these 3 pillars of the business, is legislation. So the legislation or the legal process for mandating filters for domestic launch in the UK had its first reading in Parliament here in November last month. And the second reading will be in February, and we fully expect that to go to full legislation around 2025. So when we look to scale this technology, we look for similar demographics and fact patterns. So we're really excited. So France has legislation that's already committed from 2025 to mandate microplastic filtration in laundry. And Australia's done the same from 2030. So that gives us the starting point to take those products to new markets. The technology works in both places. And what we also then can do is extrapolate out the size of those markets to give us an idea of where we are. So 31 million households in France and 13 in Australia, before we even start moving into the wider European Union. That's about another £200 million of revenue opportunity next 3 to 5 years. We're already testing this, so we managed to extend our Kickstarter across Europe, and we've got some great results over the course of a couple of weeks. And we're also talking to distributors. What we can then do is take that model and roll it out. And that's really important for us because it's all about scale. And I'll keep coming back to that word scale as we go. The quickest way to get to scale, I'm sure lots of you are thinking this right now, is why not put it into the machine itself? We call that matter inside. So what we're doing at the moment is working with 8 of the world's largest washing machine manufacturers to put our technology inside their machines. So when you buy a washing machine from wherever your local washing machine purchasing place is from, you'll have our technology inside it. What's crucial to us is that our technology, we believe, is the best and the most usable and most environmentally impactful that's available. So for us, it's really important that we put that technology in as many machines as possible because it gives us the maximum impact, the maximum amount of microplastic emissions prevented. That's what we're all about. So we're working with 8 of the world's largest washing machine manufacturers. I'm on contract with one of the world's washing machine manufacturers, actually right now putting our technology into their systems for launch in 2025. That's about 750,000 units in France alone. They sell about 15 to 20 million units per year globally. So these are enormous numbers and enormous access to create impact. We're also talking to commercial laundry companies, as you might imagine. So I'm talking to one of the world's largest commercial laundry companies at the moment right now to put our technology into their dryers. And that's, again, super exciting. Capturing tumble dryer lids. Now, no one else I know gets quite as excited, apart from the guys here, about tumble dryer lint. But for us, that's really important. And I'll come back again as to why that is very shortly. So this is how we scale technologies. And just to give you an insight about how we do this, around taking that concept of microplastic emissions and coming up with a scalable solution. The circularity piece is central to what we do. We're really excited to be part of CIRCULAZE, particularly with Michael being involved. Cradle to Cradle principles are exactly why we exist. They're one of the founding books, founding sort of concepts for the company. We actually give all new employees a copy of the Cradle to Cradle book. I have a copy on the shelves over there where we give them out. But that circularity is really important to us. So this is on screen just a really quick example about what we're doing. So we ran a campaign with a company called Small in the UK, and they do home delivery laundry. We asked people to send us back their tumble dryer lint. So this is a box full of someone's tumble dryer lint they send back to us, and we're recycling this. So these pictures here, for example, on screen, one of those is the principal ecologically focused sustainable insulation material building. It's called Rockwool. That's on the left. On the right is an insulation material we find inside washing machines. And in the middle is a piece of technology we've developed which takes tumble dryer lint with additives and bindings and creates an insulation material. And what we found is that is equivalent to both those other materials for thermal and acoustic insulation. We're also working then to develop new technologies. So we have some compound materials with recycled content for new plastics to meet some of those EU regulatory requirements. Long term, we think we have a line of sight and a roadmap to be able to create pure virgin recycled PET, which is a really exciting part of that roadmap and a key part of what we're trying to achieve. And then finally, the real scale. So Matter Industries, how do we take this and really address textile production, municipal wastewater, any large scale pollution stream? And this is it, just as a small example. This is Rob and Fergal from our engineering team running our big version. This is a filter based on our exact same technology. So this is the Gulp technology, just to give you some size scale. That's about 1 meter in diameter and will flow about 1 million liters of water per day through filtering at about 90% effectiveness at 1 micron. So super high scale, high volume, very small scale filtration for us. We're really excited about how we can take that forward and start working in much larger scales than domestic laundry. And for that, and for the scalability of the business, partnerships are really key. We're really super lucky to have these guys on our cap table at the moment. Some really powerful names from the space around circularity, around ocean health, and about impact investment. And that's super important for us. And just some of the examples of the companies we worked with. These are the guys who have said we can share this information on our website. We have other significant commercial clients as well. I think is if there's one takeaway or one ask for today, I mean, we are raising at the moment, but partnerships is the question I'm going to ask really. If you can help us in any way on our innovation program, through funding or through common R&D or collaboration, if you can help us with education or the legislative process, these are where we're looking really to scale our business. So please do get in touch. There's some contact details here. Obviously, you can contact us through CIRCULAZE as well, and we'd love to hear from you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Rob. This is so impressive. I know when I heard first of Matt and the idea, it was mind-blowing because it's the beauty of it. It's so simple from the idea to collect it in a filter, what we wash out with the laundry. So it's really, really great to see that and to see that it's already running and it's already used in machines from German part, I would say Miele. And yeah, and hope we get or we will see more of this great collaborations in the future. What I would like to know, perhaps, because you talked about the legislation part, right? Is the question, how is regulatory, the situation with the regulatory, how does this help you? Or would it help if they would change the regulatory in 5 or 10 years? What do you expect on this?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. Thank you. I mean, for us, the regulatory side of things, we think is not necessarily a condition or a dependency for us to scale this technology. I think what's really interesting for us is that it accelerates absolutely the uptake of technology. And we have, as I mentioned, a regulatory program around domestic laundry in particular. When you start talking about industrial filtration as well, the EU's just finished its consultation around microplastics as a topic. there are 4 pillars on what they're trying to manage, mitigate, regulate, legislate around. One of those is obviously textiles, but typically all the other major sources of microplastics they're looking at too. We see that program being really important. We're expecting their recommendations this side of Christmas, maybe early next year, but we're keeping a very close eye on that and getting involved in the process too, really importantly for us. And we also see regulation in other spaces too. So, you know, we talked about the plastic tax and the regulations around recycled plastic content in virgin materials. We're seeing regulations around textile production, about microplastic emission rates in labeling in Norway. I think what gets really interesting is we're not just necessarily about microplastics. We capture everything down to a micron. So if we can capture a micropollutant in any format, then we're really interested in that. So we're super excited in a really strange way with the progress the US is making around PFAS, forever chemicals. So microplastics are quite a significant pathway for these chemicals that never break down in nature. And actually, if we can capture the microplastics that the PFAS are attached to, then you are able to stop some of those emissions. And there's a huge amount of regulatory activity in the US around that at the moment. But I think what becomes really interesting is that circularity story. One of my jobs as CFO is to look at how we fundamentally sell ecological technology to people who don't necessarily want to buy ecological technology. So how do I create an economic benefit for this? And that's absolutely about the circularity piece. Can I create clean, usable water that I can create, that I can use as a product? And that becomes the value to the customer. Or even better, I'm capturing material along the way. Can I create value from that material? Makes the economic argument to take up the technology. And then effectively we can use economics to create the ecological impact we're targeting. That's what gets me really excited in the morning.
Yeah, one doesn't go with the other, and that's why also it's so important to educate people that they know. Also the customers, the client is very important because he will push the market and ask for those solutions, right?
Absolutely, absolutely right.
Perhaps another question, how can you measure the impact which you create? This is always a question, always also for circularity. How do you measure? What are the KPIs, or monitor? How do you measure it?
Yeah, again, fantastic. Thank you. This is a topic that's super close to my heart. I think for us, I mean, it's really important. What our mission is measurable impact. And we're really lucky in that our product is, you know, for every unit of gulp I sell, for every washing machine I sell, for every install on a wastewater treatment plant, I can calculate exactly how much revenue I've generated with how much impact I'm able to generate. And I think we're really lucky in that respect where we have a direct correlation between revenue and impact. And for us, our impact is exponential. So for every gulp I sell, it's then constantly creating impact. If I know how many gulps I've got in the market, I can start calculating how many plastic-free washes we've contributed. And I can also, based on our knowledge and research about how much microplastic is emitted per average wash, start to calculate how much microplastics we're stopping every month. And I can do that for washing machines. And again, I can do that for wastewater treatment plants and textile production and so on and so forth. So for microplastics specifically, we have a very direct measurement method. What we also then look at is the secondary part. So that's not just microplastic emissions, but what our impact of saving those microplastic emissions are. And for example, the ocean's capacity to absorb carbon or produce oxygen, or the number of people who are not exposed to toxic levels of microplastics and PFAS, for example. So we have these measurements built in already, and we get super excited about blue carbon, about modeling, for example, the impact of microplastics on the ocean carbonic pump via their damaging to phytoplankton populations, for example. But there's a measurable correlatory and causal effect there. So we can say, if we've stopped this much microplastics, we can contribute to the mitigation of this much carbon out of the atmosphere. That's where we get really excited.
Yeah, very cool. But last question, how can we as clients, perhaps because we buy all these microplastics, how can we change also our behavior to buy other products? Because you have a solution for the bad products, but should we buy other products at all from the beginning?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that's typically our consumers are ethically sort of conscious. I think the first thing you can do is educate. And be aware of the problem and be aware of the footprint. And, you know, obviously, hopefully we've all learned something today. Please tell your friends and your networks. The more people know, the more we can do about it. There are some things you can do, particularly at home laundry. This is typically your area of control. within your sphere of influence, we like to say. So yeah, if you wash in a lower temperature, if you wash less frequently, if you use your clothes for longer, these are all great ways of reducing microplastic emissions from home. We agree, frankly. You know, I would love not to have to sell filters to stop microplastics being emitted into the environment, because we don't produce microplastics. Until we have that solution, then we have a barrier that blocks from the technical cycle to the biological cycle, to use cradle-to-cradleism. So we have this period of time where we have to do something, and it will take a long time to transition away from microplastic and microfiber producing garments and textiles, for example. It will happen, and we're super supportive of that process.
Okay, yeah, very well. Yeah, still a way to go, but so cool that we met you guys. And yeah, everyone who is interested, you can contact directly Rob or also us. We'll be happy to do a matching, whatever. Thanks a lot, Rob. Have a great evening, and we will proceed with our next startup. It's the startup number 3 in line. And I'm very happy. We will see now and hear from Kieran Smith, who is joining us from Kenya, Nairobi. And the story it's interesting. It started in Zurich when Kieran had the idea to start Mr. Green, and then you took it to Africa. That would be a question for later on, how this came from Zurich to Africa. And what is this about? So in the global south, we have this problem that the cities are drowning in single-use plastic, and so is also Nairobi. And since 2017, Mr. Green Africa has created 120 jobs and has improved the livelihood of more than 2,000 litter pickers by providing them with a fair and predictable income. In the same time, this litter pickers has cleaned up the environment by collecting over, and this is really impressive, 6,000 tons of waste, and now you process this plastic in a factory and sell it to other manufacturers. So happy to have you here, Kieran. Thanks for joining, and yeah, we are very keen to hear more about Mr. Green Africa.
Thanks so much for having me. A pleasure to be here, and I guess what we've heard from the other presenters is really what we have in our solution. Is we intend to make, or we have already to a certain extent made, this informal market that especially is very present in the global south and in different nations in the global south, who make a living of collecting plastic or other waste materials that they can sell on to into supply chains. Yeah, and it's when we started out, the core of the business was really around a purpose-driven, inclusive way of how we buy the plastic back from those communities and give them a fair transaction, give them a transparent transaction, give them a better deal. Yeah, so very similar to the fair trade principle that you see in banana, tea, and coffee value chains, where smallholder farmers are usually folks who get the short end of the stick. We have applied that principle into our value chain, where our smallholder farmers are waste pickers who harvest every day. Yeah, so that inclusive, local focus piece was very key from day one, and then is still key today. And then the second element, in order to really do that at scale and sustainably, we have to do the value addition in the country of origin. So like it is for many commodities, unfortunately, is that the commodity gets extracted out of the country of origin, and then the high value addition gets done outside of that country. And for us, it was very clear also from day one that we do the value addition locally. We tend to joke sometimes that we had to build in those couple of years since we were existing, that we had to build 3 businesses, the business of collecting and aggregating and buying back plastic and convincing the waste picker community that the deal with Mr. Green Africa is the best. The business of manufacturing / recycling, to converting the waste, plastic waste, into high value. And then the business of selling and placing this recyclate, that high quality recyclate, into local value chains with and together for brand owners. And you'll see when I show a little video of what does that really mean. But we've early 2020, we've been able to launch the first packaging in Kenya, if not even in East Africa, made out of 100% locally collected, locally recycled, and locally made recycled content again. Yeah, so the full closed local loop, and that's what we are about in a fair and transparent way. So yeah, with that, I'll quickly show you now a video that gives you a little bit of a sense and a context of where we operate and how we operate, and then I'll open up for questions. Africa generates 22 million tons of urban plastic waste every year. Most of the plastic ends up in our environment, rivers, oceans, and are made from virgin plastic. Collecting and processing plastic to produce high-quality post-consumer recyclate will offer us a circular way out of this problem and create decent and sustainable jobs in and for emerging markets. I'm Kieran Smith, co-founder and CEO of Mr. Green Africa. Over the past years, we've been able to build a tech-enabled platform that manages and aggregates plastic waste from the streets all the way to a high-quality food-grade PCR. This enabled our customers to remove over 4,600 metric tons of plastic waste today. We have also been able to include over 2,000 waste pickers into our network, earning fair, transparent, and predictable income from our buyback centers and other collection channels that today collect between 50 to 80 metric tons of plastic waste every week. And I think this is really significant. Let's reimagine plastics from waste to value. A local, fair, profitable, and transparent clean resource that enables a localized circular plastics economy. Together, we can close the loop. But I guess everybody was able to see a little bit what it is, the essence of what we do. And by the way, the packaging that you've seen in the video with Unilever, the sunlight packaging, is the packaging that I mentioned that was made out of 100% recycled. So with that, I would love to open the floor for questions.
Okay, yeah, thanks. We had some issues, but I think the message and the main points were clear from the video. Yeah, it's really thrilling what you did. Perhaps the first question would be, what did you start in Zurich and then brought to Kenya? Because you had this idea already in Zurich, but Zurich is a completely different market, right?
Yeah, and it's a different model. It's the same ethos, but it's a different model. So in Zurich, a couple of friends of mine, we were basically in a flat share setup where we moved out of our parents' home, but we adapted the behavior of consumers in segregating different recyclables in the household level. But in Switzerland, and especially also in Zurich, if you want to do the recycling activity, you have to bring back the recycling to different stations. So either government provided deposit systems or retailers, etc. And we found it quite inconvenient. And so we decided to set up a subscription-based convenience service that comes directly from the doorstep to pick up. So in Germany, you would see that in the yellow bag that they have, very similar to that concept, just for all recyclables. And then the additional twist, the social twist, is that people who have who are marginalized in Switzerland, so people with disabilities or people who have long-term unemployment issues, etc., they usually get integrated through NGOs and organizations and try to find back into the job market or find purpose within the job market and within society. And so we started working with these institutions to engage, and so folks, they either go and do the collection or they do the separation before it goes back into the recycling market. And as we did that, we were able to build quite some traction in the market, and recyclers started approaching us, asking us, hey, can we buy plastic? Can we buy other recyclables from you? And that's the light bulb moment for me when I realized, oh, we're not just, talking of waste here. There's a commodity behind this. And so that, coupled with my personal interest in the next frontier markets, fast growing markets, was kind of like in 2012, the first time I traveled to Kenya, and I realized a huge pile plastic waste lying around, and knowing that it has value, I try to figure out how could we create value, right, for the people who do collect it, or create more value for the people who collect it, and in a proper recycling setup. So that's pretty much the concept.
Ah, okay, very good. And what are your plans? Because now you are situated in Kenya. What are your plans for extensions in other regions, or also in the global south? Other countries have the same problem, right, with this single-use plastic?
Yeah. So what we've seen is that there are many initiatives. If you look at the entire value chain, there's many initiatives that are very similar to what Mr. Green Africa is doing, you know, but we have one key uniqueness, and that one uniqueness is that we're already fully captured in the entire value chain. Right? So you have initiatives who do collection and work with waste pickers. You have companies, recyclers who do the recycling piece, but not the collection piece. And then you have initiatives and companies who try to sell to brand owners directly, create the traceability, the transparency, etc. So in separation of these three things, they exist, but in the combination, it's not many do it. Yeah, and I think that's what made us unique and enabled us to build traction over the years. What we were able to do is close some funding late last year that allowed us to focus on three things. So number one is we grow now from our capacity that we have today, which is around 3,500 tons a year capacity of recycling plastics from waste into value. We grow that now to 25,000 tons every year. Yeah, so a much more massive setup capacity that you have not seen in a country like the global south before, or at least in an Eastern African context. And then the second focus point that we're focusing on is the element of collection. So we've talked about waste pickers, and we've talked about them picking the litter from the streets, from dump sites, and try to sell it on. Now, the reality is that those folks, they only do between 5 and 20% at most of all the plastic that is actually being littered. Yeah. So how can we increase their productivity? How can we increase their capacity? And we started experimenting with consumers, enabling consumers to also deposit plastics into a network of Mr. Green Africa agents, for example, where they get an incentive scheme from that, right? And we've done some really exciting pilots. And so what we're doing next is we're obviously going to finalize the learnings and tweaking the model a bit to accustom to the consumer model, and then scale that, right? So that's focus area number 2. And focus area number 3 is replicating now this model that we've built of buying, processing, and selling directly to brand owners into different markets in the global south, and starting in Africa. So by the end of, let's say, 2025, we want to have presence in Eastern, Southern, and Western Africa. So big capacity, what we call a flagship factory in Kenya for the Eastern African market, consumer model rollout, and finally the replication across other regions.
Okay, very interesting. Yeah, we got 2 questions from our audience. I think the first might be already answered meanwhile. This is, how do you hope to bring long-term change in the industry, and what are the limits to your vision? Yeah, perhaps the limits part, perhaps you can talk about that.
Well, yeah, I mean, the limits are definitely in how far you can go in including recycled content in what applications, you know. Like we've been able to achieve it now for home care, and we're about to do it for personal care, like lotion or rinse off and leave on elements. But how do we do that for food grade, right? That is still a big question besides PET. So for HCP and PP, there are limitations to get into the food grade quality element and food grade application, right? And the biggest consumption volumes do happen on food packaging, right? So there are limitations for us. And of course, we bet on the fast growing technologies that are coming that enables us to also feed into that and really focus on creating the infrastructure of the collection system, right? And really truly making the waste pickers part of our value chain, where they are productive and the proper element of the supply chain. Yeah, so I would say where I see limitations, but from a collection perspective, there's massive opportunity. So it's not just plastic. Waste pickers can access to any commodity, if you will.
Interesting. Yeah, and you already mentioned you are quite far in your startup. You're Series B already, and you work or you sell to big corporates like Unilever, when I got that right. So, but what type of support could still be useful for you right now? What would that be?
Yeah, so I guess, you know, the element of being able to include more brand owners into our value chain. So introductions to more brand owners who believe that they want to buy high quality, local available recycled material that has the traceability element to it and the fair element to it. I think that it's a notion of social procurement, if you will, of the commodity that they use for their packaging. So getting introductions to such brand owners would be very, very critical as we grow and align with the customer base. And so I would say that number one. And number two, in terms of support, there's always, you know, talent and people that we're looking for that might have expertise. So for a good example is quality management, you know, in the space of plastic recycling. Is there talent out there that would be willing to join the journey of Mr. Green Africa to help us in quality management, setting up the right processes? So it's really about operating excellence for the business. People, specialists who want to join the journey, who can contribute to a very fast-growing business with their specializations and really make us ready for scale. I think that those are the areas of support that we see we could definitely use.
Yeah, we often ask, do we need a VC or something, and we forgot about the people, the talent side, right? Which is also very important. How do you work, by the way? Is it decentralized, or do you have a hub in Nairobi, or how are you organized in your company?
Yeah, I mean, we have a hub in Nairobi, of course, but we've expanded the business to multiple cities in Kenya. So Mombasa, Eldoret, Kisumu, so western, eastern Kenyan part. But the main headquarters is definitely in Nairobi. And we have a central and a decentral system. So our collection is very decentralized, but our processing is very centralized.
Okay. Yeah, very good. And as you also mentioned, it's a lot also about trust, right? If you recycle products, this is one of the most important values or also assets you have, also regarding to your clients.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, trust, transparency are key elements.
Yeah, cool. Did we forget something? Otherwise, I think yeah, we're done for today. Kieran, many thanks. You joined us. It's very
Thanks for having me.
And yeah, we are lucky to also continue this journey we started together. So if anyone has other questions or would like to reach out, you can do that directly to Kieran or also contact us at CURAZE. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much. Have a good evening.
Have a great evening. Bye-bye. Yeah. So that was yeah, our third trend tour, our virtual trend tour on waste. Thanks a lot for joining us and for listening in. And we have one more virtual trend tour coming up next week, Monday. It's always Monday. It's always 5 o'clock. And this will be about energy. So I wish you a nice evening wherever you are. And yeah, see you soon, hopefully. Bye-bye.